This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 14, where we're going to talk about the latest cloud news from Microsoft and Amazon. Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Windows Azure, Office 365, SharePoint, Exchange, Lync, and related technologies. Just the information, no marketing, no BS. I'm Andrew Connell.
And I'm Chris Johnson.
And we're just two dudes telling you how we see it. What have you been up to lately, CJ?
I've been pretty busy at work, to be honest. I've got a lot going on in my day job at the moment. And I'm gearing up for a trip to New Zealand in February. I'm going down there for both business and pleasure. So I'm down there for quite a while, sort of 3 weeks or so. So there's a lot to get done before I go. And then I get back. I'm in Seattle for maybe 24 hours. I'm not even sure if it's 24 hours. And then I leave to go to a SharePoint conference in Vegas at the beginning of March. So let's just say it's going to be a little painful.
Just pack it in a little tight there, huh?
Yeah. I'm not even sure how I'm going to unpack, wash all my stuff, repack, and leave in time. So I've got a little while to figure that out, but it's going to be a pretty busy period.
I've done that before, and I think I resulted to just the 2 days before I left, I think, I dumped like almost everything in the hotel laundry and just foot the bill and let them wash, iron, fold, and everything. And nice little package. Just put it back in my bag and was like, it's more important to have a little bit of family time and to kind of chill out at home and rest, and then turn around and just run right back out. So,
well, it's also like I'm doing 2 sessions at SPC, and that's also a little terrifying. And you know, it's a big show. You want to get it right, and so preparation for that is underway. But I don't feel 100% on top of that yet, and also then going away is just going to compound that problem. So I got to make sure it's all squared away before I leave, basically.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about real quick is touch on a few Azure bits that I've seen recently. So there was one that came out, and we'll put these in the show notes, but there's some Azure news that came out, and the title of the Azure News blog post is Windows Azure Hyper-V Recovery Manager is now generally available. But I think the bigger piece, too, is a post by ScottGu, where he talked about a lot of changes and improvements with Azure websites, monitoring improvements, and such. So the big things, I don't really see these getting a lot of press, but to me, they're huge. So there's 4 big things that I saw that were announced around Azure websites. So the first one it's called staging support with swapping. So those of you who've worked with the very first iterations of Azure, where we had web roles and worker roles, you would deploy things you have a production, you had a staging instance, and you could deploy stuff to staging, test it, make sure everything looked good on a specific URL. And then when everything was all in good shape, you basically had this little swap button that you said, go through and deploy it. And effectively what that did is it just swapped the virtual IPs under the covers so that now production became staging and staging became production.
Yeah, it was a VIP swap, right? It was They just sort of changed where the IP was pointing. Yeah,
and they've done the same thing now with websites. You don't get any of the kind of scale configuration with staging and stuff, but you can do first-class domain names. So you could do something like staging.andrewconnell.com and then have your www.andrewconnell.com. So makes it really, really cool to have your own staging setup. They've done a really good job with that.
Yeah, this is really important for production software, right? You want to be able to you want to be able to update it without downtime, which this is also really important for. So even if you don't use it as a sort of a test environment, you put up your stage version, right? Which you load up, you make sure it's up and running, and then the VIP swap is instant. Well, even if it's not instant, it's seamless, I should say. So you don't have to worry about downtime. Whereas if you had to take your instances down, update them, and then bring them back up, your users are going to have downtime, right? So this makes it really seamless for people in production environments to be able to update their software and have it still function for users without them seeing any glitches or weirdness going on when you're updating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very cool. It's a very cool addition that they've added. Another thing that they've done too is they've got this new support called Always On Support. Have you seen this?
I've heard about it, but I don't know what it is.
It's really simple. It's just basically a keep alive. So when you turn it on, they ping your website.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So you turn it on, they ping your website, and then they have a new thing that has not really been discussed much. Scott Guthrie says he's going to blog about it again in the next few days. So by the time the podcast goes live, I'm sure he will have done it. But you can set up little jobs and even integrate this stuff into your code to where it effectively keeps your website from going to sleep. So you don't get hit by those just-in-time compilations that have to happen, and then by lack of requests, things kind of go to sleep. It just constantly is pinging your website every X number of seconds. So
that's really interesting. I mean, so this is cool because sites go to sleep, right? And processes get recycled every now and again, and you might, spinning up an ASP.NET website can, the first hit sometimes takes a little while.
Mm-hmm.
So this would help keep your site really nice and responsive, which for those who have done SharePoint development will understand this really well.
Yeah. This is it's effectively what's going on is that when the site goes to sleep, when there's not enough requests, the app pool gets spun down, and when the app pool gets spun down, you lose all the cached compiled objects that are there. So what the first person that hits the site after that happens, they get hit with the just-in-time compilation. So they take the hit for everybody else. The page gets compiled, then it gets cached, and then that compiled object gets used for all subsequent requests. So what the trick is that to keep your site warmed up, is the way that we refer to it, is that the sites just constantly get hit by a dummy user, and Azure's got support now for being that dummy user to keep things always up and running and warm, so that when someone hits it, when the CEO hits the intranet on the first thing in the morning, he's not the one that takes the hit. Somebody else took the hit for him, so he thinks the site's nice and quick.
Oh, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah.
The other little useful tidbit of information I see squirreled away in that announcement is this thing called web jobs. Did you read about that?
Yeah, that's the stuff that he's going to write about more, where you can actually add your own little like tasks of, what site should you hit or what URL should you hit and stuff like that.
I see. Yeah, it's it sounds very familiar to worker roles in some way. So, being able to write background code and running it within an Azure website.
Yep.
That was always one of the big differences, right? Is you couldn't sort of do these headless worker role processes in Azure websites. Well, there were lots of hacks to be able to do similar stuff or achieve the same thing with background threads and all that sort of stuff. But now it sounds like they're sort of starting to bake that into more of the core platform.
Yeah. So another thing they've done too around websites is they've done some improved monitoring. So first, there's two pieces to this. One is that previously the monitoring metrics, I think they were by the hour. Now it's all the way down to the minute. So you can do snapshots all the way down to the minute. You can see what things were, what the metrics were on your site down to the minute. And then another thing that they've added, and this has also been added with SQL Azure databases as well, in addition to websites, is that now you can set up metrics with thresholds and alerts. So like with websites, I can set a threshold for data in or data out or CPU utilization or HTTP status errors or messages like 401s or 404s or whatever.
That's pretty cool.
With SQL Azure, I can do it with storage. The amount of storage I use. And so if I exceed one of my thresholds, I get an alert that fires off and tells me, hey, heads up.
Nice.
So
that's really useful because I notice my blog goes down quite regularly. So I would like an alert when that happens.
Sounds like you're on WordPress maybe?
Yep. I got to shift that guy over to Orchard as soon as I've got some spare time.
Yeah. It's funny, the Orchard stuff, I've got we actually already have a module that does the warm-up stuff. So it keeps the site stays alive and it goes and hits URLs that I tell it to hit. So
nice.
Oh,
that's cool.
Yeah, and another thing that I've noticed too, this was really cool on the Azure side, is that Gartner, you familiar with the Magic Quadrant?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Magic Quadrant, especially for the portals portals and web. I can't remember what it was called at the time, but basically the web content management Magic Quadrant and the portals and collab Magic Quadrant from my time on the SharePoint team at Microsoft.
Yeah, they recently Gartner has come out with their enterprise application platform as a service. So it looks like they are kind of calling this APaaS instead of just PaaS. But what they've done is in the leaders quadrant, there are only 2 people in the leaders quadrant. Salesforce is way out there, but Microsoft is in there as well as a leader. So that's, I think that, both in that what that means in the top right quadrant, you've got 4 different. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Magic Quadrant, you basically have 4 sections on it. Going up the vertical axis, up the y-axis, it's the ability to execute, and going out the x-axis to the right is the completeness of the vision. And then, so you look at the 4 different quadrants. The top left quadrant is being a challenger, which is the ability to execute, and then having not so much a fully complete vision, but the top right quadrant, which is where everybody really wants to be, is being a leader and the ability to execute. But on the bottom right quadrant, it's more of being a visionary. So your ability to execute isn't really there, but you got a really good vision. And then the bottom left quadrant is more of being like niche players. And that's, not so much a complete vision, not so much ability to execute. But that doesn't mean you're in a bad spot, depending on the quadrant that you're in. I think it's more that you just play to a specific niche.
Yeah. Gosh, that's really interesting. I also wonder why they called it APaaS, which is kind of odd, versus just everybody else calls it PaaS, right?
Yeah, they say that for around PaaS is all about the platform as a service, but that a PaaS that's designed to enable. This is coming straight from their definition of APaaS. Okay. When I say APaaS, I'm not saying. I'm not using the term application platform as a service. I'm saying A is in the singular letter A. So a PaaS that is designed to enable runtime deployment, management, and maintenance of cloud business application services as an application PaaS is what they call a PaaS. And then when it's designed to support the enterprise, that's called enterprise APaaS. And so that's what this enterprise APaaS, this is what this Magic Quadrant is, of having both Microsoft and Salesforce in the top right quadrant. And I thought that this really stood out because it really shows that they're doing a really good job in the Azure space, and it really builds off. That was released on January the 7th of this year of 2014, and it builds off of another Magic Quadrant that Gartner released back as of August in 2013, which is the Cloud Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS. And in this part here, they've got Amazon AWS is in the top right quadrant. They're way ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, no surprises there.
Microsoft is not in the top right quadrant. They're in the bottom right quadrant, but they're in a really good position on being a visionary for their IaaS piece. And I guess I would probably look at this and you could see some differences in the sense of there's a lot more different kinds of instances that you can choose from in the menu with AWS EC2 compared to Amazon virtual machine, Microsoft Windows Azure virtual machines. There's only a certain number of sizes that we can choose from.
Yeah.
And because I think also not only just the number of sizes, but you've got different kinds of specialized AWS instances, like heavy on the graphics CPU cores, on using very fast SSDs and stuff like that.
Yeah, gotcha.
So,
well, yeah, I'm sure we're going to see. It's good to see Microsoft in that visionary category, right? It means they've got some great ideas and they just need to follow through on them.
Yep.
But that's so the APaaS Magic Quadrant. Okay, we'll link off from the show notes to all of these things, by the way, for everybody listening as well. So you'll be able to go check these out and see what we're talking about and see a whole bunch of dots on a chart.
yeah. It's useful. So it's interesting stuff because I mean you know this all too well, being on the SharePoint team with Microsoft from years ago, that a lot of companies, they wouldn't even consider a solution if you're not in a specific part of the Magic Quadrant.
Oh yeah, I mean So these analyst organizations are very heavily relied upon by CTOs and CIOs of large organizations to give them ammo and information to help them make decisions and back up their decisions as well. It's not always the perfect information, but these guys spend a lot of time researching all these different companies. I've been on the other end of it, having to answer all their questionnaires and the interview process that goes along with these Magic Quadrants, and it's pretty in depth, to be honest. They ask a lot of questions, and it's a hell of a lot of work to respond to them. So they do their background info on you.
Yeah. The last bit of Azure news that I wanted to point out here, and I don't know how much of this is news, but it's an article that I stumbled across this week. It's really, I found it was really good summary. It's by Windows IT Pro. The author is Sean, and excuse me if I'm going to get the pronunciation incorrect, but it's Sean Duby. But the title of the post is Windows Azure Active Directory Updates in 2013, and his subtitle really nails it from at least what I've seen watching what's referred to as WAAD, WAAD. Subtitle is, if you haven't looked at the Azure Active Directory in a while, look again. This baby's had a growth spurt. And he goes through, starting at about April of 2013, all the way up through December, of all the different major drops that they've done around WAAD. And they really have. They've done an amazing job with this. So it's something that, if you're looking at identity for around Azure, you definitely ought to check this out. They've done a heck of a job with this.
Yeah, I think, in previous episode I mentioned Azure AD is kind of the cornerstone of Microsoft's hybrid and cloud identity story, and this is super critical to get right because it's going to be the key to enterprise cloud computing and identity, and so it's great to see them smashing it. It's really, really good.
Yeah,
but you're right. They've been adding stuff almost monthly, It's kind of crazy.
It's been hard to keep up with. I mean, I've actually want to go back and try and suck this stuff in and absorb it. It's a really good article. I want to go back and take a look at. So, so we'll link that up in the show notes.
Link off to that and have a good read because it's, half these things I'd never heard of. And it's just because they're doing them so fast, you can't keep up. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have it all summarized in one spot. Mm-hmm. I don't know if, Sean will be listening to our podcast, but maybe we'll let him know we've talked about his article.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So in other news, shifting vendors for a moment, IBM. Dun dun dun. Who knew we'd be talking about IBM on this show?
Are they still around? I'm just kidding.
Apparently,
I am so kidding with that.
Hey, I think I used to use IBM machines once upon a time, and I'm glad to see they're kicking around. And so I read an interesting article today. Yesterday I actually found this article. It's called "IBM Goes All In on the Cloud, Announces a $1.2 billion Global Service Investment." And so IBM's getting in the cloud game, apparently even more than they are now. I wasn't really familiar with all the ins and outs of what they're up to, but apparently they've been making some inroads in this space, and I really need to catch up on exactly what they're up to. But this article is talking about this new investment. Basically, they're spending another $1.2 billion on building 40 new data centers around the world, including China, which I found pretty interesting. And so that was pretty impressive. So they're obviously trying to play a bit of catch up, and apparently they've already spent a bunch of money on this. So including some acquisitions like SoftLayer and so forth. So they're trying to make some inroads here. So it'll be interesting to watch this space and see what happens there.
So this is, I guess, I saw some other news where they're looking to sell off their server business. So this would be more of a data center style business where they're going to be stocking it with not just the IBM servers, but doing it with other vendors as well, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess watch this space, but hey, it's always interesting to have another provider, and IBM are not exactly noobs at this service sort of stuff. So it'll be fascinating to see what they're up to and what comes of it.
I wonder if they're going to do anything with their what we used to know as AS400s, but I guess they're now called the E series. Where these things aren't. I know mainframes are not something we talk about all that much anymore, but there are plenty of companies that they are still the bedrock of their organization, and they're expensive to run, they're expensive to maintain, they're expensive to be an administrator for. So I wonder if that's going to be a cloud service that they offer. That would be some companies would surely like that, of kind of doing what mainframe IaaS business, where lift it up and let somebody else run it, and what better person to run it than the company that actually kind of did it.
Right, exactly. And so the other interesting point on IBM is, from what I understand, the last 10 years, they've really turned into, they've got a huge services arm. And by services, I mean people on the ground in organizations helping build stuff and run stuff for customers. So they've got this massive, consulting arm, basically, and services arm. And so they've got these tentacles into huge organizations around the world that rely on them for helping to run their infrastructure and run their business. And so they're in a really unique spot to have a fully sort of embedded sales force already in the organizations that are going to want to use this stuff. So they've already got a sales force ready to go and start selling. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they make some decent strides with getting customers on board.
Interesting.
So don't count them out of the cloud world. I guess they don't come up in conversation a lot, at least in my neck of the woods. So I found this one really interesting.
So now we got, I guess you can put 4 big players on the cloud then. You say Microsoft, Amazon first, I would say. And then, Microsoft with Azure is a very close second. And then I guess, was it Google, and with their entry recently into GA, and then now IBM as well.
Yeah, and then you've got people like VMware and Rackspace and those guys as well. I don't know if they sort of are of the size of some of those others, but it's definitely heating up.
Yeah, I always put like the Rackspaces of those guys in the FP Web's more of a managed services group than just kind of, I know they do IaaS as well, but it seems more of a managed services bit, which is a little bit kind of I shouldn't label it. I shouldn't label it without having more information, but yeah. So moving on, one more bit of news here for me that I wanted to share is around the AWS or the Amazon side. And this week they announced some new VM instance, some new EC2 instances, and then also did some big price reduction. So you know what price reduction from AWS means? It's just like airlines. Who do you think is going to be coming out with it next too?
Yeah, I'm sure they all get in a room like some sort of cloud cartel and say, well, if you're going to reduce your gas price, we're going to do it too. And or you're not going to reduce your gas price and things like that. I'm sure they're in cahoots.
It's the Silicon Valley version of OPEC.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they busted out a couple new they call it an M3 instance, which is like their second generation of general purpose EC2 instances, which are good for a good balance of CPU and RAM and everything. So they've added a couple new instances there, and then they cut prices on their EBS, which is it's their standard storage volume and I/O operations. They've knocked some of those prices down up to 50%, and then also for their storage, their S3 storage, they've knocked that down anywhere from 11%. Really, actually, down from about the low end is down 6% for those people who are in the 1 to 50 terabyte tier. But if you're in the 5,000 terabyte or more tier, God, I'd like to know who those customers are just out of curiosity. But 5,000 terabytes or more, they've knocked those prices down to up to 22%.
That's totally my photos folder backup right there.
Oh, that's all right. My DVD reps are all over there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, as it gets cheaper to run these services, they're going to start passing that stuff on to try and beat the competition. So it's kind of nice to see. I wonder where it's going to equalize, or if it will ever equalize.
I don't know. I think it's just
too hard to say.
Hardware gets cheaper, things get cheaper, prices keep going down. So if only.
Yeah, and they get so I think I know that one of the big things for Microsoft is getting better at running the service as well. Like it's not just the costs of the hardware, but the costs of running the service keep coming down. The cost of goods, so to speak, and so that'll they're getting way better at that. So that's often how they're getting making prices cheaper, I think.
Yep.
One final bit of news. Apparently, Intel owns 95% of the cloud, which I felt just blew my mind. Like I really didn't know this, right? And I'm kind of two minds. Like on the one hand, I'm like, who cares? And on the other hand, I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting because I never really thought about it before about what chips were in these machines sitting out there in the cloud. And like I said, on the one hand, maybe some people say, who cares? I'm a bit like that in that I just want my stuff to run. I really don't care whose chips it runs on. But I guess Intel cares quite a lot.
I was going to say the only people that really care about that are the people on Wall Street where, in the investors between Intel, AMD, and that kind of stuff. It's like I'm with you. I could care less what you're running. I could care if I'm need some graphics heavy thing. I care how many CUDA cores are in my VM. But aside from that, I don't really care who's giving it to me.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting challenge because, like Intel, you used to buy your computer off HP or Dell or whoever, and you get the computer and it's got the little Intel Inside thing on the front, and it was one of the standard sort of things that along with the Windows sticker that all the manufacturers put on the front as part of the licensing deals. And so now Intel cloud computing's taking off and all that. And now they still want their brand to be out there. So they've invented this thing or come out with this new sort of brand called Powered by Intel Cloud Technology, which, kind of like the old Intel Inside brand or whatever you want to call it, to try and sort of drive awareness of what is running your cloud stuff. And they're going to try and basically say that we're better at running cloud, and so therefore you should find cloud providers that use our stuff. And so they've launched this website called the intelcloudfinder.com. And so you can go up there and go see who's running their stuff, the various service providers and bits and pieces, which I thought was pretty interesting. So they're basically trying to build awareness that they are the dudes that are running 95% of cloud computing today.
Always.
I'm cool with it, so long as like when I start my Azure website, it doesn't go ding 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 ding. Then I'll be good.
I've always wondered why we see that on the side with CPUs, but I never see stored by Western Digital or stored by Seagate or stored by Samsung.
Yeah, Intel they were pretty smart. That's all mandated as part of their licensing agreement that you have to do the little jingle at the end of adverts and stuff like that. So people make sure or are made sure that they know it's powered by Intel. So yeah, like I say, I'm cool with that so long as it doesn't jingle when I start a website. I'll be good.
Made pretty by NVIDIA.
Exactly.
Cool. That wraps up our news for this show. If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or an MP3 file and provide a link so that we can play your question on the show. Our theme music is an excerpt from Evaporated Eric by Monk Turner used under Creative Commons. You can subscribe to us in iTunes by searching for the Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find a full transcript and show notes of each episode. You can find us on Facebook searching for the Microsoft Cloud Show, or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.